Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Abuse Podcast. I'm Eddie Wilson.
And I'm Joseph Lopez.
And we are recording from our in-home studio in Lebanon, Tennessee today. And we want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing and why we are doing it. Both of us have been victims of spiritual abuse. And when you're a victim of spiritual abuse, you come out of it and you're wondering what's happened, what is going on.
Yeah.
And there's books out there and there's podcasts out there, but just to be honest with you, the podcasts for spiritual abuse are hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to dig hard and you've got to dig deep. So we just want to give you a definition of what spiritual abuse is. I'm going to read one. Joseph's going to elaborate on it. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. So on spiritual abuse is a form of emotional and psychological abuse. It is characterized by systematic pattern of coercive and controlling behavior in a religious context. Spiritual abuse can have a deeply damaging impact on those who experience it. This abuse may include manipulation, exploitation, enforced accountability, censorship of decision-making, requirements for secrecy and silence, coercion to conform, control through the use of sacred text or teaching, requirement of obedience to the abuser, the suggestion that the abuser has divine position of authority, isolation, superiority, and elitism. Now, that may sound like a mouthful, but let me tell you guys, Joseph and I have had every single one of those things happen to us. We've been a part of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very real thing. It's a very damaging thing. And before I get into just kind of like describing what I feel spiritual abuse has been in my life, spiritual abuse is not only a very real thing, but it's also very damaging because it's abuse on a very spiritual level. For all of us, spirituality is a very deep part of our personhood. And when you trust a spiritual leader to guide you and to help you in your spirituality, whether that's in an organized faith setting or not, you make yourself very, very vulnerable, more vulnerable than other contexts where you may experience abuse a lot of times. So that's another dimension of why it's so damaging. But for me, the way that I define spiritual abuse, just on how I've experienced it, is it's a setting in which someone who has spiritual authority in your life encroaches on your individual personhood and forces you to contort to a predefined mold, often in a religious setting. It denies you the ability to think for yourself, to feel for yourself, and to follow what you perceive as the divine independently and freely in a way that you see the world and the way that you see spirituality. So
that's really good. So we read kind of a textbook definition, and then Joseph kind of gave his interpretation of that. And I can tell you this, when you've been in it and when you come out of it, it will mess you up. You don't even know who you are anymore. And you find yourself agreeing to things that, it's one of those things, it's like, how did I end up here? How did I end up signing away my personal time, signing away my time with my wife and my kids, sacrificing my career in order to build another man's kingdom? It is a strange place to be.
Yeah.
You think you're all alone because we're conditioned to not talk about it. We're conditioned just to suck it up and have a good attitude.
Or you're taught that it's your problem.
Yes, exactly. So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves on what we're going to be talking about in the upcoming episodes, but we wanted to give you kind of an idea of what this podcast is going to be. It's going to be me and Joseph sharing our stories. It's going to be telling what's happened to us. We're going to try to protect people that we have been involved with. We're not in this to destroy any pastors or bring down a church, but I'm going to be honest with you. There are changes that need to happen out there in the church world because it's a business and it's running people over.
Yeah.
And sometimes the vision is so big, it forgets that there's people involved and they have feelings and they have hurts, and it's a big, complicated mess.
And another thing, Eddie and I have both taken a lot of time to process our experiences. This isn't like we've recently freshly come out of an abusive environment and we're trying to get back at the people that have hurt us. We've taken time to process, to pray it through, to heal, and to really develop a healthy relationship with how we feel about these individuals and these experiences. So like Eddie said, we're not trying to take down any churches. We're not trying to be militant against organized religion in a sense, but we are trying to create a safe space where we can share our story, maybe validate your story and your experiences, and motion for change in the greater, in the church context and any other context where this is being experienced.
So we're excited. This is episode 1, kind of a preface on what we're going to do. And in the future, I'm going to be telling my story. Joseph's going to be telling his story. We've got some guests in here, and as things, morph, and as we find out what happens, we're going to be hearing from listeners. And who knows, you might be an upcoming guest on our podcast here. And your story, when I first started sharing my story, people would say, well, you just need to get over it. You just need to forgive. You just need to move on. Mm-hmm. That's in the past. And what they're doing, it's not a subtle form of control. That's control.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're shutting you down.
And gaslighting.
Yes. So that the system can continue to do exactly what it's doing. Mm-hmm. But I also heard from a lot of people, and really most of them secretly and privately, saying, thank you for sharing this. I thought I was the only one. I didn't know how to verbalize what had happened to me, what I was going through, what I experienced. And I have just an incredible amount of data where people have reached out to me personally and said, this is my story. And I'm telling you, the church, it helps people, but it also hurts people. Mm-hmm. And we're here to help you with that. We're here to give you validation. When someone says, you know what, I believe you, that is a validating thing. Mm-hmm. And it lets you know that you are not alone. So Joseph and I are here to let you know you have a voice. Mm-hmm. And you are not alone. And, we're just 2 guys and we're doing this podcast and we don't know who's going to hear it. We might have 4 listeners, but I do know this. If one of the listeners that hears this is validated, well, that's a good start. And that's what we want people to know. Any final words before we get into the next episode?
No, but just find it interesting. You said we were in a studio because we're really literally in a pantry upstairs. But, we'll call it a studio and move on from there.
Yeah, we've got the doors shut. We've got a barrier set so that the dogs don't come up and bark while we're outside.
We got 6 dogs downstairs.
6 dogs downstairs right now. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. But I believe that is it. Oh, yeah. One last thing I want to say on this podcast. We are not good. This is not a money podcast. We're not in this to make a penny. We're not going to have sponsors. There will not be commercials. It will not be presented by. This is just 2 guys sharing their hearts, helping people.
Yep. Super excited.
All right. We'll see you on the next episode.